Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. Welcome everybody to another Cellar Door Skeptics. Tonight I thought we'd start the show off with my interview segment. So lately you guys have all seen a change in the show. You've seen a little bit more interviews. We're doing those more often. Tonight I have a special guest who has created a short documentary that won Best Documentary Short in the 2017 Nevada International Film Festival. And a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about tonight, and we'll throw a couple trigger warnings out there just in case anybody listening has had bad experiences at abortion clinics. But tonight the documentary looks at it, 2 abortion clinics in 2 different states, and how nasty some of the protesters can be outside there. And the documentary, which we'll put links in the description, shows an extremely good take and a very unbiased take of what people that work at abortion clinics have to put up with, the police bias that seems to happen in all the different states that we're in. And hopefully we'll get to talk to her about how everybody listening tonight can actually get involved and make a difference. So please welcome to the show, Lindsay Beyerstein.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and these are fun topics. You know, I say fun topics relatively, cautious, right? This isn't great that we should have to talk about this, right? These things shouldn't just happen.
Yeah.
But it's good that we get to start putting some exposure on these issues and starting, and I like that you're getting the message to a national audience. And that's kind of what drew me to, to bringing you on the show, because it's like, holy crap, how many other people don't know that these things are going on?
So many people have said that to me as we've been going around to different cities and doing publicity for the movie, that people will come up or in Q&A say, I thought this stuff all ended under Bill Clinton. I didn't realize it was still going on, but here it is, sometimes, in their own backyard.
Yes. And it's crazy, and as the viewers of the show know, and we'll just openly say it, I used to be one of those kids as a young kid out in front of the abortion clinics. Now, I'll be honest, we never had the megaphones. We didn't even really have the signs, honestly. I mean, we just stood out there and offered them little tracts and said, hey, if you want an alternate, here's where you go. But if you watch your documentary, these people are pulling buses up in front of the clinics. They're bringing like speakers and like, microphones. And that's just crazy. Like I grew up very conservative, but we never did some of those things. And to see them still happening in 2018 is just mind-boggling.
It really is. And these people are equipped. So in the North Carolina clinic, which is the clinic that was the most dysfunctional, they'll show up with sometimes 2 PA systems and microphones, and they'll just blast the clinic at, levels that are way above the sound limit. They've got an ordinance that you're not supposed to be more than a certain number of decibels, and they'll be exceeding it like at rock concert jackhammer type of levels that you can just hear from blocks and blocks away. You can sit inside the clinic and feel the fillings in your teeth practically rattling because they're out there screaming on the microphone so loud about how, you should really give some thought to having your rapist baby and stuff like that. And it's just, and they've obviously, they're hooked up to national organizations, so they have all these giant signs and stuff that obviously they've ordered from some central website, very glossy with giant dismembered quote unquote fetuses. Those sorts of things have been analyzed and have been found they're actually not aborted fetuses. Usually they're babies that, full-term babies that are being autopsied or whatever. But anyway, these things purport to be aborted fetuses. If you ask the people, so do you think that the pregnancies that are terminated in there end up producing anything that looks like what's on your sign? And the honest ones will admit, no, this clinic only does abortions up to 20 weeks or whatever it is. They know that really what's on the sign is nothing like what's happening inside.
Yeah, and that's crazy. It's part of a propaganda machine, right? And I don't think this is a new propaganda machine. I think they've developed new tactics. I mean, again, I handed out tracts here. I'm watching a documentary about people with megaphones. So obviously the tactics have changed.
Yeah, they're very sophisticated and they communicate a lot amongst themselves. I mean, so they've got centralized talking points. They've got national networks that give each other legal help. So exactly what tactics will probably. I mean, realistically, almost nothing these people can do in North Carolina will get them arrested. But they have legal help in case anything like that happens. Yeah, they're really equipped. They're pros. Underestimate these folks at your peril.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny a little bit because you think about this and you look at the churches and how churches organize, but not all churches are that organized that they're despondents together, right? It's just that idea. If you create a church, all these people will flock to it, right? So if you have the name church, people go, oh, hey, I could join this. The right to life movement, I never knew it was this connected, I guess. And I guess I'll be cautious, and there, just so you know, there's a little bias in me because I grew up Christian. I'm an atheist now, so there's a little bit of bias. So if I say something against Christians, I don't mean to offend you.
Oh, I'm not a Christian either. So.
Okay, all right.
But not that I want anybody to be biased against Christians, but no, I'm a secular humanist myself.
Okay, so just in case, because sometimes I get going in an interview and then I don't even think about it. But some of the you think about how churches are, and you don't see super large churches that are super connected like Walmarts, right? There's not a Walmart of all these churches all over the place. There's denominations that are like Walmarts, but there's not actual churches, and everything has a little bit of different variance to it. And you have your new flavors and your old flavors, but then all of a sudden you look at the Right to Life movement, and like you said, they've got lawyers. That's just insanity to me that these places have lawyers and they're that connected that they're sharing best practices. That's a business function,
Yep.
When did these people these organizations evolve to be able to do that?
I think they've been building gradually with the overall rise of the religious right. Started probably as far back as 1972 Roe v. Wade era, where people, or even slightly before, when people realized the writing was on the wall and that abortion was going to become a big political issue as well as a big religious issue. And they've been building infrastructure over the years through churches, through various kinds of NGOs and nonprofits, and that infrastructure has just been growing and growing and flourishing over the years, I think. Yeah.
One of the points the documentary points out, and I think this is very important, especially given some of the jaunts that our show takes into socialism and police corruption. There's a lot of police that are interviewed in this. There's a lot of discussions with the police, I guess. I guess you don't directly interview to say, hey, let's get your opinion. What'd you ask?
Well, we tried.
Yeah, you tried. They didn't care to, though, did they?
I mean, in North Dakota, the police were wonderful. Officer Jessica White, super cooperative. She's the downtown resource officer whose beat is around that clinic. So we called them up and they took us for a ride along, and she introduced us to people that she on the beat and her colleagues, and we got some time in the police station with her and everything. She was totally open and accessible, and the department as a whole was really supportive of her talking to us. Whereas in North Carolina, they absolutely refused to go on camera. I had this long back and forth with the spokesperson for their police department, trying to get them under any circumstances, like, can we just come down and talk to you even without the camera? I'd like to get your perspective. Nope. And so what we had to do eventually was just walk up to the police officers with the camera rolling and just start talking to them.
And so maybe that's why they look so awkward, because you had the one officer and he was talking about the noise ordinance. He's like, yeah, I went farther over here and it's only at a 40 decibel. And it's like, yeah. How does that help? And so how about this? I have a kind of a question, because I couldn't tell if the police were quite on the Right to Life side, or if the police were just saying, I really just don't want to get involved because I want to be non-confrontational, right? I couldn't tell which one it was. So what was the feeling that you got from, we'll just pick on the North Carolina police because it's the easiest.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was hard to tell. We didn't really get to talk to them that much. I felt like some of them, the blonde cop, I think he, just to speculate, I don't know, it seemed like he might have been more sympathetic. Officer Suggs, who was the guy who was talking about doing the decibel readings and everything, I don't know, really what his personal leanings were. I think he was just kind of your standard frustrated cop, because the laws aren't written in a very clear and enforceable way, and the terrain of this the trend of the abortion clinic is such that it actually is legitimately difficult for them, unless they want to do undercover operations, to actually get down there and observe people breaking the noise limit, because it's very difficult, as he says, to take an unobserved reading. The anti-choices have a long, clear view of anybody approaching them, so they can just turn it down. And of course, we've got, the era of text messaging. They don't even have to be within sight. People, I suspect, and nobody knows this for sure, but it would not surprise me at all if some of the protesters were texting the police, some officers.
Huh. And that's crazy. I just, I don't know. So on the other side, though, so you have all the cops and you have all these other things, and you guys didn't really get into the specific laws, right? But my question is if North Carolina has that big of an issue for that abortion clinic, why is there not more push to have an officer at least patrol that area more often?
Well, there has been, especially since the documentary came out, that we're still in touch with the clinic defender activists in North Carolina and the clinic itself. And sometimes there are 5 police officers out there on their busy days on the weekends where they do the most business. But the cops just kind of stand there, and the same structural problems persist. They're not really doing anything.
Yeah. And, it's kind of funny because, in an era where we have a very majority Republican government right now, and they want to cut costs, right? So obviously cutting the costs would mean not having as many officers out there, right? And I know they don't report federally and stuff like that, but just as a mentality, North Carolina is pretty conservative.
Yeah, they do have a Democratic mayor in Charlotte, though, which is a good thing.
Yes, and that's a good swing for that state. But you kind of wonder, okay, think about this, though. If they wanted to cut costs, they wouldn't want to put as many police officers out there. How do you fix that? You either create more laws to prevent this type of chaos, or they need to figure out a way to move the barriers and move the laws so it pushes those people farther away from the clinic. But they're not doing any of that. No one's doing any of those things.
And it would be so simple. Like, I don't even think they necessarily need that many new laws to protect the clinic. They could just start by enforcing the laws that they already have. Like, not letting people wander into the street, for instance, not letting people touch moving cars, which I've seen happen, and you can see a shot of that in the movie. Just those kinds of really basic things, not obstructing the sidewalks. And they do sporadically come by and tell the local pastor that he can't have his giant tent set up in the street. After which the pastor filed a lawsuit against the city.
Did he win? Or is it still in court?
I think it's still pending. Yeah, it just went up recently, the lawsuit papers.
I'll have to look that up because I'll have to follow that story. Because you just look at that and you go, yeah, well, dude, if there's a law, why are you suing them now? Now you're just drawing attention to yourself.
And he has this whole, I read the brief, the lawsuit thing, and they have this whole argument that they're being persecuted because this law was never meant to actually keep crap out of the sidewalk and street. It was meant for some other obscure purpose, which is clearly not true. The city, like all cities, has an interest in keeping crap out of thoroughfares. But he claims, oh no, they're just enforcing this against us because we're anti-choice and the city is biased and blah 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 blah.
Which is funny because if they were that anti-choice as police officers, they would be out there being more forceful. I mean, you can see. Okay, again, take Charlottesville. They had a rally there. The police were very active in that rally in terms of standing there and blockading both sides of the protesters. Right?
Yeah.
If they wanted to get more involved to protect pro-choice individuals and clinics, they could do that, but they're not. So
yeah,
it's an illogical step. And some of me, again, my bias comes in and says, well, that's kind of what religion and faith get you. You're making illogical leaps and conclusions.
And it's strategic, though, on their part, because it's costing the city money, and the city doesn't like being sued. And what we kept hearing over and over from city officials in various ways was, well, we don't want to crack down because we're afraid that they're going to sue us.
Mm-hmm.
And then, critics like the people from the ACLU would have rejoined, like, well, yeah, what do you think you have lawyers for? What do you think you have a legal budget for? You're supposed to spend that money to defend your right to enforce your own legitimate laws, right?
Exactly. Ugh. So I have a proposition, maybe not a question, I guess. So looking, watching this documentary, and now, I know you created it last year, and I don't know how long it took you to film, but for me, the big thing is we have a orange person in office. That'll be the nicest thing I could say about it right now. And we can watch how he got into office. And you can actually, now that we're over a year in, right, you can now actually take and go back and watch the footage and politically or, strategically analyze how he came to power or how he came in office. Because I don't know how much real power he actually has. But you can watch how the trolling mentalities, how the manipulation tactics, how the gaslighting and the abuse tactics that he used were bought by so many people in the world. Do you feel that that's a lot of what the tendencies that you're seeing now in the right to life crowd that are outside of these abortion killings? Are they doing some of these similar things that they either seen Trump portray or were doing before Trump even brought them to light?
I think that they were doing a lot of that stuff even before Trump, that they're authoritarians, they're bullies. They like Trump because they see the same kind of top-down, big man bully mentality that they replicate themselves every day in their own communities. That what they're really interested in is not the welfare of mothers or babies. They're interested in being the big man on the mic who shames the dirty sluts in their mind coming into the abortion clinic to keep people in line. Like, if they cared about mothers and babies, they'd want to make sure that the children's health insurance program was authorized. They want to make sure that hospitals were top rate. They'd want to make sure that all kinds of things were going well, but what they're most interested in is just this abortion clinic that they're obsessed with. And I think it's entirely about policing women's sexuality and nothing to do with the welfare of mothers or babies.
And that makes sense. We had a friend of ours, Alexandria, who worked for an abortion clinic in Alabama, of all places. And some of the things I seen in your documentary, she talked about when we interviewed her about a year and a half ago. And for all those listening, I'll find that episode and I'll post a link in the description as well to that episode, and everybody can go back and check out her personal story, because we interviewed her and she talked about, the types of things they had to do to protect the women coming into the clinic. And then I watched her documentary and I go, holy crap. So this isn't just like an Alabama thing. This is a, North Carolina thing. This is a Nevada
thing. This is a New York thing too. I mean, some of the stories I've talked to people that escort outside of various clinics in New York, and they've got some pretty hairy stuff going on too, in terms of, amplified sound and aggressive protesters and even threats. We didn't see any threats of bodily harm. I mean, once you show up with a camera, people try and stay at least somewhat towards the right side of the law. But some of the stuff that escorts have told me in interviews about what their day to day is like, even in New York, liberal New York, are pretty hair raising.
And that's just crazy. I mean, and Alexandria was telling us about how there was a house next door to the clinic that the anti-choice people were trying to purchase so they could put people round the clock in front of the clinic.
Wow.
That's some dedication. I'm sorry. As much as I despise what they're doing, that's crazy, insane dedication to something. I mean,
yeah,
you don't see that very often.
No.
And the principles that they're looking at, you can easily pick some of these apart. Like you said earlier with the CHIP program, it's horrible because there's not enough funding to actually just pay somebody else. Like, for example, put me in that situation. If I lived over there, I could go to an abortion clinic and walk out and start going, okay, hey, let's talk about why you're against this. Okay, it's your religion. Good for you. But let's talk about the reality of it. So can you prove that a fetus has any sort of actual life value, right? Can you explain how they're a person? Can you explain how you didn't vote to give kids health care? Oh, if we're going to do this, why don't we give single mothers, free childcare for X amount of years so that they could go back to work and actually support themselves? Oh, why don't we stop a lot of the rapes and actually prosecute the rapists who are doing these things?
One would hope, right?
Yeah. And so that's
they say, we're expounding the word of God because we offer these women, some toys and diapers and a baby shower if they agree not to terminate their pregnancies. We care so much about these women.
And that's just insanity to me that you just want to go out there and challenge them and be like, don't do that. Fine, I guess the toys thing works, but
it's surprisingly unrewarding to actually talk to them.
I'm sure it is. It's probably like talking to a presuppositionalist. There's no point in having a conversation with them sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that these people are just like, you try and talk to them about things. Well, I mean, do you think it's really fair if women are going to die? Would you make someone carry their pregnancy to term even if they're going to die? And they'll just say things like, that never actually happens. And then if you point to them, some peer-reviewed studies that said, yes, this happens all too often in certain relatively common health conditions, they'll be like, but you just have to pray and have faith that God won't kill you. It's like, well, is that really fair to make somebody have faith? And they're like, well, you should have faith. And at which point I'm just exhausted and just
And that's why you fight back in a different way. You create a documentary that hopefully will get extreme amount of views, and you'll shoot to the top of the charts, and we can put this in front of every single person so that people realize you could be anti-choice if that's what you want, but at least stop standing in front and making other people your viewpoint. You have your own opinions, but stop bullying people.
You don't literally need to be shouting at them with a bullhorn while people are trying to have a private medical procedure.
Yes. Yeah.
Stay out of the damn street.
Exactly.
Like people, and I do support people's right to protest too. I don't want to say that, people shouldn't be allowed to even state their views and have, signs and protests if that's what they really want to do. But there are rules that are just content neutral, objective rules about how to have a workable society. Like, you can't block the street. You can't get in traffic. That's dangerous. It's not okay.
Exactly. So I don't want to take too much of your time up, but I do have another question. So what were some of the creative tactics that the abortion clinics were using to help fight and counteract the insanity that they were being met with?
Well, they had a wonderful little thing. I don't know if you saw the rainbow, if you saw the big rainbow umbrellas that the escorts were carrying.
Yes.
Okay, so not only are those huge umbrellas just physically creating a barrier against the elements and also just to preserve the privacy of the patient, they also have little Bluetooth speakers embedded in them so that they can play something upbeat to drown out the noise on the bullhorn.
That's genius.
They like to play a little Beyonce or something like that. Yeah, they read them themselves. And the escorts in general are quite, very sophisticated. They've got two groups of people. They've got the formal escorts who get people from their cars in the private parking lot into the building. And then they've got the clinic defenders who are sort of the outer ring. So the clinic defenders defend, direct traffic, because the anti-choices will stand out there with official looking signs and try and fake direct traffic so that they can confuse women and see if they can make them miss their appointments. So the clinic defenders are out there in their color-coded vests also, trying to make sure everybody gets into the parking lot safely. And then they also have signs and whistles and various other things to, just counter protest the anti-choicers. So just to kind of get in their faces and antagonize them. I'm not sure that's actually such a great idea. If it were up to me, and it's not, because I'm a journalist and it's not my job to tell anybody how they should do their activism. But to me, like, the traffic direction is way more constructive than the yelling at the anti-choicers with, your own signs. Although I must say the clinic defender signs are funnier.
So, quick question: Do they wear the same jerseys? I don't know what they call them. Safety vests. There you go.
Yeah, singlets. They will sometimes. I haven't seen them with the exact. The clinic defenders now have their own special color-coded ones. They actually fundraise. They created an organization and fundraise so that they could have matching official-looking vests, which I believe are pale pink, and the escorts ones are blue to the clinic defenders pink, if I remember correctly. I didn't see anybody with a singlet that was matching them, but I think people will sometimes show up with kind of standard-looking, emergency vest type things and pretend.
It would be kind of cool if maybe we could get all the abortion clinics in the United States to unite, right? And everybody wore some weird type of hat that no Christian would ever wear, right? Yeah. What if a penis hat or a vagina hat or something like that? Just something that's so off the charts that a Christian would never actually wear that. Right.
We did meet someone who had a costume that she made. This was actually in Missouri. It didn't make it into the documentary, but we did a little interview with her. She had a giant vagina costume that she would wear as a counter-protester, just to kind of weird out the Christians.
And that's amazing. I guess if you're going to have to fight them, I like that tactic better than yelling at them, because I don't know how arguing with them is one thing, but yelling at them is a different thing. And, I would enjoy the argument because I like that, that's just kind of part of my personality. But the yelling at them, it does nothing but raise my blood pressure. And then I have to go take medicine, and I don't want to do any more of that than I have to.
I mean, I love arguing in general, but these people are just singularly unrewarding to argue with or to critically question.
Yes. Ugh. And you kind of wonder, maybe they should start taking polls and find out what churches they go to, because obviously they're local, right? I can't imagine they bus in people from other states or other cities to do this. Maybe they do. But
in Charlotte, it seems to be like largely for groups of people that are like, I'm just throwing out a number, let's say a 40-mile radius or something like that, from what I can tell. And it's an amazing amount of interfaith cooperation. They've got Catholics, they've got Protestants, they've got different kinds of Protestant sects, everything from your sort of more Southern Baptist-y to actual Amish and Mennonite people.
Jeez. But it would be kind of fun almost if you could just go to their church and protest. I mean, like, can you stand in front of the church and be like, we're not against what you believe. We're just against you coming to our abortion clinics. And, oh, by the way, we're going to use megaphones and scream in front of here about how, I don't know, how we love Hillary and how we can't stand Trump. And we're just going to make a scene just because you guys can't seem to leave us alone. So we'll come violate your holy day if that's what we need to do. And maybe that's just my aggressive tactic, but,
I feel like, to me, just observing it, it seems like these clinic protesters thrive on drama and love to feel like they're being persecuted. So if you do stuff like that, like, what got them into this isn't normal human reactions. Like, let's go do what's fun and rewarding and interesting. It's like, no, let's go do what makes us feel like martyrs. So if you play into that, you're just encouraging them.
That is true. So tell everybody a couple of different things, where they can find you at, how they can help support the documentary, and what are some of the biggest needs of the abortion clinics that even if people can do something locally, how can they help out?
Okay, you can find me on Twitter at Beyerstein. That's Beyerstein. And you can also search Beyerstein and The Breach to listen to my podcast. We're going to be kicking off season 4 in just a couple of weeks. We've got a very special investigative season 4 planned. And you can watch the documentary if you Google Karen Chaos and Beyerstein, it should pop right up for you. And in terms of what people can do to get involved, I would encourage people to contact both their local Planned Parenthood and their local abortion clinic and ask if of the abortion clinic whether they have a clinic defender group or an escort group that they might want to get involved in, or just in general what their needs are, whether it's financial, whether they need volunteer work, whether they want people to be doing fundraisers in the community. There's all kinds of different ways to get involved. And it's really interesting what wonderful friendships we saw in the escort and clinic defender groups, that people were just this. If you're moving to a new city, let's say, my executive producer was joking, if I ever move to a new city, I'm definitely going to go become a clinic escort because it seems like such a great way to make friends.
Yeah, so you don't have to go to church anymore. Just go to a clinic and help volunteer, and you'll make a bunch of friends.
Exactly.
And they'll all be like-minded. You don't have to worry about, getting into a political argument with them over certain things. I mean, most people that, volunteer at least are somewhat liberal. I can't imagine they have ultra-conservatives volunteering at abortion clinics, but...
I didn't meet any.
I can't imagine, but I guess you never know, but chances are that wouldn't happen, so... Well, Lindsay, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We'll have all your links right into the description of the show. And hopefully, if you ever do another thing, you can reach out to us and we'll help promote anything else that you do.
Thank you so much, Christopher. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today because we bring the discussion with the sources.
Hey, my name is Wesley. I'm from the Atheist Nomads podcast. Kick back a while and listen to my friends on the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all again for sticking around through the first amazing shot number 1 segment. If you are just tuning in, you should rewind it and go back to our first interview of the night with Care and Chaos, award-winning documentary.
Yeah.
Directed by Lindsay Beyerstein. And yes, You don't get to hear the joke I made before the show, but I had to ask her name before the show to ensure that I didn't get it incorrect. Because I butcher names. It's just, I'm horrible at names. I should get better at it. Maybe there's a class I could take on that.
That was pretty solid. And my guess is it's not so much the a class or something. You're just going to have to stand up in front of people, maybe take a book of names and go stand on the corner on the highway or something with a sign and just say,
like the
"What's
Book
your
of Mormon?"
name?" Yeah, I don't know. Is there something like that where they yell out names in the Book of Mormon? I haven't seen. I haven't seen the Broadway action. I know that the Mormons were like blessing people that were dead into their church, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, you got to make sure everybody goes to heaven. I'm surprised my mom didn't become Mormon, because then she would make sure that her atheist son and atheist kids would all get to go to heaven with her.
Well, yeah. Well, that's a pretty good insurance plan. I don't know. But I'm sure they probably have some restrictions though, like to get you into the system. I don't know. Your name's got to be good or something. I don't know exactly how. Like,
we'd have to ask Joseph. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that we just don't know about.
I'm sure there's a lot that happens in those giant churches in Iowa, or no, is it Utah?
Yeah, it's Utah.
It's Utah. Yeah. All right. Well,
for me, it would just be I would rather have their money, right? I mean, because we're about to talk about poverty.
Yeah. And
I know at the beginning of the show we kind of didn't go over the topics, and the only two topics we had specifically for tonight was the documentary interview, and then Hannah has an article that he brought to my attention called "Extreme Poverty in America. Read the UN Special Monitors Report." It's a Guardian article. It's a very in-depth article. It's not as long of a read as I thought it would be, but they have a whole full report that takes you into the actual organization, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, I believe, that actually did the full review. And that's actually got even more detail in it. But, those are the two main topics we wanted to hit. If we have time, we're going to get to a couple of funnier things to lighten the mood a little bit. But, we talk about the Mormons and how much money these people have, right? They have tons and tons and tons of money.
Well, they got to have those nice crisp white ties and white shirts and black ties. I mean,
and the Mormon underwear too.
Cheap. Yeah. Oh man, that stuff is so bad.
It is, but the outrageous amount of money churches spend not helping the poor is something that we kind of want to talk a little bit about tonight. So, Hannah, what drew your attention to this specific article?
Well, this article, I thought it was pretty cool because it's kind of like the outside view. So we always hear about, the interior view of American poverty, and it's kind of like people that they see what's going on. There's a weird little bias that makes it easier to overlook stuff that's not quite so nice when you're an American. But this is just basically an external look as to what's going on. So like we heard things about Alabama having some of the worst poverty in the industrialized world, in the first world, and some of those findings towards the end of last year. And this is also an article from last year. It's December 2017, Friday the 15th is when it was published, it looks like. And so what this kind of did is this is the beginning of the article is just kind of talking about this person's travels and going through and just kind of experiencing the whole of American poverty, and also seeing some of the elite life in this country, and then just having the back and forth comparisons. And then towards the end, they really get into the full UN report. And what they did nicely in this article is it's got a nice little story that they tell, some of the cool things, and then basically a Cliff's Notes to the UN report, kind of cherry picked for some of the more unbelievable data points from this that make the United States gap between the rich and the poor and the people who are really struggling and trying to make it. It's really, really vivid towards the end of this part.
And if you remember last week, we talked about the world income gap, essentially. We talked about that last week. And yes, I don't know. I guess if it feels like we're making too much of a big deal about something, I guess send us an email. But this is kind of where we're headed. A lot of Hannah and I've passions change right over the years. we were super into the atheist movement, and now we're kind of saying, hey, what about, poverty? What about politics? What about income inequality? What about people protesting against abortion clinics for no reasons? So we've shifted the show a little bit, but the income thing is a big thing for us. And yes, maybe it's a little bit because we're both somewhat socialist in our political leanings. So Hannah a little bit more than me. But it's one of those things where this is stunning. I mean, when you actually sit down and read through this, it's amazing.
It's not coming from like a Republican or Democrat. That's the thing that gets me. Like I said, this is an external look. So this is kind of like the rest of the world said, okay, we got a bunch of people to take a look at this, and this is what we found. And that's alarming, because we're so used to this partisan. We got memos coming out all over the place in this country, and so like, well, there's a red memo, so we have to have the rebuttal, which will be like the exact opposite blue memo. And sometimes we need to just kind of step back away from that. And so this does a pretty good job of it. So the authors are basically going through and talking about their visit through there is a dramatic change in direction of U.S. policies because of the most recent administration change. And some of the biggest thing that they mentioned is the proposed tax reform, which when this was written, it hadn't yet passed. And so it did. And this is something that's going to be exacerbating some of these problems. And obviously the trickle-down economics people say, no, this is going to make things better. And all of the economists are saying, no, it's going to overheat the economy, which, watching the Dow Jones Industrial Index in the last few weeks, it looks like there's a correction happening, and it's reducing. It's basically bringing some of that runaway Wall Street stuff back down. But what they're pretty much coming down to is they're worried about dramatic cuts in welfare that were foreshadowed by Trump and Ryan. Speaker Paul Ryan. They said that once this tax bill is fully instated, what it's going to do is automatically kick in this thing called pay-go, which we've mentioned a few times. And what that requires is, of the $1.4 to $1.5 trillion that the tax bill is going to increase the deficit, that money has to be cut. So it'll be $150 million a year that have to be cut for a 10-year period and then they want to cut it from the social program. So they want to cut it from welfare. They want to cut it from any place they can, because it's one of the requirements for this. It's a specific thing called pay-go. So the United States is one of the richest and most powerful, technologically innovative countries, but it's not using its power or its technology to help the 40 million people that are in poverty. So that's kind of the 10,000-foot view of what they're talking about here.
Yeah, and I want to read a little excerpt. The gentleman's name is Philip Alliston, I believe.
Alston, I believe.
Yeah. Alston, Alliston. I like Alliston better. But so he says this. He says, I have seen and heard a lot over the past 2 weeks. I met with many people barely surviving on Skid Row in L.A. I witnessed a San Fran police officer telling a group of homeless people to move on, but having no answer when asked where they should move on to. I heard how thousands of poor people get minor infraction notices, which seem to be intentionally designed to quickly explode into unpayable debt, incarceration, and the replenishment of municipal coffers. I saw sewage-filled yards in states where governments don't consider sanitation facilities to be their responsibility. I saw people who had lost all their teeth because adult dental care is not covered by the vast majority of programs available to the very poor. I heard about soaring death rates and family and community destruction wrought with opioid addiction. And I met with people in Puerto Rico living next to a mountain of completely unprotected coal ash, which rains down upon them, bringing illness, disability, and death.
That's all America.
Just let that sink in. Yeah, that's America. That's what people live in. And I manage people for a living too, and I have a lot of people that come to me that are on that lower level of middle income, or on the lower level or the higher level of low income, right? And we talk through a lot of their struggles. I mean, a lot of them will come to me, and I'm pretty flexible as an individual. I have an individual that works for me that has a child, and she's a single mother, and I try and do everything in my power to ensure that there is nothing that comes to her, because one day her kid could be sick and she has nobody to take care of her kid. She has
just keep that in mind.
Yeah, you have to keep all of those different things in mind. But then I see these articles and we talk about these things and we sit here and we go, there's still people that are worse off than she is, that are taking care of their kids in these type of environments. And what's disgusting to me is we just took a big tax cut, which I'm all for taking a tax cut if we're going to turn around and utilize or allow that money to be funneled back to taking care of people who can't take care of themselves right now.
The article isn't all just a downer, though. So that's one of the other things that this guy does mention, that there is some positive stuff. So he met with state and especially municipal officials who are determined to improve social protection for the poorest 20% of their communities, energize civil society in many places. There was a Catholic church in San Francisco that opens its pews to the homeless every day between services, which, I mean, we like to critique the church, but I mean, in some places, just open your doors and let people have a place to sleep. That's what the picture actually is at the top of this article, if everyone takes a look at it. But then, I wanted to mention that coal ash thing in the in that Puerto Rico. That is basically acid rain. Like, you get that stuff into the atmosphere, that stuff breaks. That's what we used to have trouble with before the EPA was brought in. So like acid rain and stuff, which will disintegrate concrete buildings and all kinds of stuff. Well, that's really bad. But anyways, they said that they saw the community solidarity in Puerto Rico was really impressive. And then there's a community health initiative in Charleston, West Virginia, that serves 21,000 patients with free medical, dental, pharmaceutical, and other services. So, I mean, there's some great stuff in here. We see the U.S. Human Rights Network doing some things and trying to benefit, but it still seems like those people, no matter what they do, are left behind by the administration and the politics. Even in the previous presidential administration, they did a lot of great stuff, but it seems like everybody's hands were locked. And when it came time to make the decision to help people, even the Democrats were not as I guess poverty conscious as I would have hoped. They were more centrist, more status quo. And so there's a lot of people that want something to change, and this is a great indicator of some of those things. So this person is talking about the different states and territories they were in and how the U.S. compares with other states. So when he's talking about states as national perspective, so like the U.S. is one of the world's wealthiest countries. And so they spend more, obviously we know about the defense funding. The Chinese, Saudi Arabia. It says right here that they spend more on national defense than Chinese, Saudi Arabians, Russia, United Kingdom, India, France, and Japan combined. And so we're spending even more money, and we just increased the total amount of money with the new budget plan. So it's one of those things that we're seeing this money get spent in places that isn't quite helping people.
Exactly. And there's a companion article called American Extreme Poverty, the UN Special Rapporteur, and it's kind of a commentary about the Guardian actually taking the journey with Philip. And the gentleman's name is Ed Pickleteen. I can't pronounce words tonight, I guess. And he talks about these different things, and they go on a fact finding mission, right? They go, how are we going to go into the depths of America? And yeah, great. They want to harbor the good side. There is good things that are happening. There are programs out there that can help. But then what do we do? Then we see in the news the Republicans are now going to cut key social programs.
They want to.
They want to, yeah. They're pushing for it. And I sit here and I go, there's 41 million people who literally have to live in poverty. And out of those, the article says 9 million. Get this. This is not 9 million people is a lot, right? 9 million people get 0 cents. Zero. Think about that. Think about earning $0. Now, I'll be honest. It makes me, I was skeptical before about some of those people standing on the side of the roads. over the last 4 or 5 months, if I see somebody, if I have change, if I have a couple bucks, you know, I'm not going to give them $50, but if I have a couple bucks in my pocket, I hand it over. I don't feel bad as much as I used to, because our nation isn't going in the right direction. We're not moving towards making America great again. We're working to make white men great again. And that's disgusting. We have all these people that are suffering. We have all these people. And we want to talk about, and now you got me on a soapbox, but we want to talk about human rights and how, you know, human rights in other countries are being violated. You know, we're like, oh, ISIS can't do all these other things, but yet we can't even look inside our own world. Think about the amount of money we spend in military power. And yeah, we could get into, should we pull out? How much should we pull out? How much military presence do you need to stay number one, right?
Yeah.
But even if we took 10% of that budget and just handed it to homeless people, handed it to programs, and I'm even to the point where at this current time, if it takes Christian organizations to start pushing this around because we can't get secular or neutral organizations to step up to the plate, or there isn't enough secular or neutral people donating to these organizations, let's get Christian organizations involved. How do we get these homeless people back up and running so they can help contribute to the economy, so that they can have safe place to live? How can we do that? And if you just literally took that 10% of that budget for the military.
So the defense budget for the military right now is right around $700 billion a year. Yeah.
So what's 10% of that, Hannah?
$70 billion.
$70 billion. So how many people did we say? How many people did we say were in poverty? 41 million.
Yeah, the extreme was 9 million. So here's a quick number. So I have heard multiple times, John, I've seen estimations that anywhere from 150 to about $300 billion would solve almost all of the world's hunger. All of it. The whole freaking thing. Like if we took, you know, we start closing in on, you know, $1/3 trillion. They said that it's possible that you could, because that money's worth tons more weight and food in really poor countries. But if you basically took something like 150 to $300 billion, you could potentially solve most, if not all, of the world's hunger problems immediately. And so
that's the world. That's not even just American.
Yeah. And so that's what I was going to say. You talk that 10% of the defense budget, $70 billion, which is roughly, you know, 25% of the total estimates that we were just talking there. And that would potentially be able to take care of the majority of the problems that we have in this country. I mean, that is a very small, I would say, a very small sacrifice, because in the last few years, since the Obama administration was reducing military spending, we were down to the $500 billion a year range. So we have increased what we would call that 10%. We have increased the spending in defense in the last few years, the amount that it would take to basically cure this country's poverty problem when it comes to just food and getting people healthy stuff. Like there are really, really big numbers here and sacrifices that would not be that bad and that difficult. And, you know, I remember when we were listening to the presidential campaigns, everybody was talking about, you know, pulling soldiers back and getting everybody back. And it doesn't seem like that's been happening. And we're seeing even more money go out to defense. So I don't really see where that's, you know, that increase, you know, xenophobic America first, if we're still spending all that money on defense outside the U.S. But I don't know. It just seems like this is something that is so easy to fix.
You would think. And
at least to put money that way.
And again, I have a really hard time when I love space stuff. I do, man. I think we need to leave the Earth and get rid of some of these things. But when I see how much money was spent launching a fucking car into space, and I'm sorry,
all private money though.
I don't care. Look, dude. Good. I'll put it to you this way: if I was a billionaire, no offense, I don't care what he's doing for science. If we can't take care of the humans to begin with that we have now, what good is it? And I get you can't do it all the time because it would bankrupt you. But what if one person stepped up and said, I'm donating my full wealth. I'm going to donate all of my company money to do this.
Well, as far as I know, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have both pledged almost their entire, I don't know, between the two of them, it's something like $100 billion or something in total value. They're donating all of their estates to poverty and all that kind of stuff when they pass away. So like it's not there yet, but it's coming, because Warren Buffett obviously is like 90 years old now. But anyway, back to the to the article, basically talking about the specific and the numbers here. Like I mentioned the defense spending, that's a big issue, but some of these other points that are on here are pretty telling. Like the U.S. healthcare expenditure per capita is double the OECD average, and I believe the OECD is the European average. And so I mean, it's why are we spending so much more money on this? But there are also many fewer hospital beds and doctors per person than the European averages. And then on top of that, bringing more medical stuff into the U.S. infant mortality rates in 2013 were the highest in the developed world. Like what is the reason we're going backwards in some of these metrics? It doesn't make any sense. So like Americans expect this is new in the UN thing. Americans can expect to live shorter and sicker lives compared to people living in any other rich democracy where there is a health gap between the U.S. and its peer countries, and then it continues to grow. So the U.S. has tons of money, but we have more sick people, and we're seeing a reduction in overall life length because we don't think that healthcare is a right. It's more of a thing that you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps and take care of. These are things that are just kind of hard to ignore.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard, to look at some of these things and just think that we can continue to go the way we're going as a nation. I mean, yeah. How can we not consider healthcare a right? How can we not consider living in a house and not being murdered a right? How can we do that? I don't get it. And in fairness, even the second article, there is, again, uplifting things. They talk about a church that opens its doors every weekday for homeless people to sleep in.
That's a nice small step. I mean, it's not really that. It's a small step. So like, I mean, I think of the Catholic Church and I think of the richest organization on the planet. So I think you could do a little bit more than just open your doors. But
you're you're right. You're right, Hannah. I mean, yes. But again, if we look at all the negative, what are we going to do? But then we turn around we turn around and we see California, one of the most liberal states in America. Guess how many anti-homeless laws they have? Just take a guess.
100?
500. 500, Hannah. 500 anti-homeless laws. Now,
so like, what kind of laws are we talking?
What in terms of what?
Like, just like you can't. There's no homeless people allowed in this neighborhood. Everybody has to get kicked out. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
We're just talking about like the San Francisco ordinances where you can't just be a homeless person in San Francisco. The cops will kick you out of town.
Yes, they talk about vagrants. They talk about the city has enacted a large number of anti-homeless laws. 58 cities enacted 500 homeless laws restricting the 4 categories of activity noted in the above article. They talk about standing, sitting, resting in public places, sleeping and camping, lodging in public places, lodging in vehicles, and I'll get back to that in a second, begging, panhandling, and food sharing, right? Those are the 4 categories that they're creating laws around.
How are those laws legal? The ACLU forced Grand Rapids to remove its rule that we had on that. We had anti-homeless laws in Grand Rapids for years, and obviously the ACLU came in and said, "Listen, guys, you can't do that." And now there's panhandlers and there's people all over our city, but it's not like it's I'm not saying this is an overtly bad thing, but like what we did is basically push that under the rug. And I would think that it kind of surprises me that the ACLU hasn't been able to get into California and make them not do that.
And then I don't know. I'll be honest. That's not part of that's not part of the research I did. This came up in part of the articles, and I guess I didn't think to maybe go through that. And maybe that's another topic that we can cover in a later segment.
Yeah, we could do that. Maybe if anybody out there is interested in, it'd be something we could take a look at doing homeless laws in the United States. Yeah. So another couple of things in the medical end, because everybody's worried about Zika last year, and these types of tropical diseases are becoming increasingly more common in the United States. 12 million Americans live with a neglected parasitic infection. Then 2017, there were documents of the prevalence of hookworm in this Lowndes County, Alabama. But think about that for a second. A neglected parasitic infection. You have a parasite in your body. There's 12 million. So, I mean, think of that number on that. 12 million is going to be close to 3%. Yeah, 3.2% of the entire country potentially has some kind of parasite, and it doesn't have the healthcare coverage to remove that. That's insane. Like tapeworms, hookworms, these types of things can kill you.
Yeah, and yet no one's taking care of the problem. I
don't know. There's some more points on here. The U.S. is 36th in the world as far as water and sanitation. Really? That's insane. America has the highest incarceration rate.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know. But actually, they did some tests. The Independent and the Guardian. We're obviously reading the Guardian right now. But the Independent and the Guardian did some tests, and just about every major city in the country fails a few basic water purity and cleanliness issues. So, like, our infrastructure is crumbling, and we do need to spend a whole bunch of money into it. And I've heard Donald Trump talk a bunch about it during his State of the Union speech, but I haven't heard any kind of legislation, and he hasn't put anything forth. So everybody loves to put the idea of $1 trillion towards infrastructure, but you take that and you keep adding tax breaks to it. I don't know where that money's going to come from. So the youth poverty rate in the U.S. is the United States is the highest across the OECD. 1/4 of youth living in poverty compared to less than 14% across these European countries. Another one that would really surprise me is the Stanford Center of Poverty and Inequality characterizes the U.S. as a clear and constant outlier in the Child Poverty League. So the Child Poverty League, obviously the Association of First World Countries, industrialized countries, saying the U.S. child poverty rates are the highest among the 6 richest countries in the world: Canada, United Kingdom, Ireland, Sweden, and Norway. Like, we don't take care of our poor. And we also don't take care of our poor children worse than any other of the rich countries in the world. So, like, this is just a consistent list of things that we're failing at. And this is specific. And this is data. There's no alternative facts for this stuff. And it's kind of sad. And so, like, hopefully everyone will just kind of soak up a few of these basic bits of information and data points, and maybe point some people towards this article. And I really think that this is kind of an eye opener for a lot of people who think the poor people who are doing a lot of the voting for people like Donald Trump were completely out of their mind. This is the group. These poor people that we've been describing here, they wanted someone to come in and say they could save them. And Donald Trump said he could. Bernie Sanders also said he would help, but we all know how that went. So, I mean, it'd be really curious to see what would have happened if we could have taken a little bit more of a socialist turn on our current administration. But unfortunately, the Guardian is where I have to go. I have to go to England for my U.S. statistics on poverty now.
Yeah. And to kind of, as we wrap the segment up tonight, and to kind of get back to what we talked about with Mexican repatriation last week, towards the middle of this article, they say, perhaps the most telling detail, apart from Saint Boniface and its sister church, no other place of worship in San Fran welcomes homeless people. In fact, many have become, even at this season of goodwill, to lock their doors to all comers simply so to exclude homeless people. As Tina Gray Gracie herself on the streets describes it to Elliston, there is a prevailing attitude that she and her peers have to contend with every day. She called it the violence of looking away. That cruel streak, the violence of looking away, has been a feature of American life since the founding of our nation. Wow. Let that sink in. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to come back with hopefully a little bit more of a lighter topic. And we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're
promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Considering how you want to help Cellar Door Skeptics, head over to iTunes or your favorite podcast app and give us a rating, because every rating helps push us in front of new listeners. And since our main goal here at Cellar Door Skeptics is to provide the most accurate information possible, we hope that more ratings will mean that more people get to hear the topics that we're presenting. We don't insist that we get a 5-star rating, but Hannah's favorite number is 5, and the more gold stars he gets, the more special he's gonna feel. So what do you say? Head on over to iTunes or Google Play, give us a rating, and help engage with Cellar Door Skeptics today.
This is Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for sticking around through our super serious interview and super serious segment. We decided to end the show a little bit more light to kind of do something that's to diffuse the tension a little bit. You know, maybe that's what we'll call it. Diffuse the tension. Help Tanner and Hannah relax before they have to go to bed to get their 5 hours of sleep before they go back to work. So
get that woosah thing from what was it, Bad Boys 2, where they had to rub their ears. Woosah. Yeah, I don't know, weird random early 2000s movie quote there, but I don't know. I found a couple of goofy things in here that I thought would be pretty kind of fun, whatever. Like one of them, I like aphorisms or aphorisms. I don't know if you're familiar with any of what aphorisms are, but it's basically like a short saying, something that expresses a truthism. One of the things that we obviously have heard is Occam's razor and Hitchens' razor. There's all kinds of different things that are these cutting little truth tidbits, these little logical tools that kind of help you bust your way through some of the garbage out there. And this is a new one that I hadn't heard of, called Hanlon's razor or Hanlon's razor.
So did you try and usurp this? Are you doing it just because it's Hanlon and it's like close to Hannah, and you'll be able to at some point be like, no, it's not really Hanlon, it's actually Hannah. They just got the name wrong.
No, there's actually a weird thing that the name thing kind of blends in, because Robert Heinlein, I don't know if you're familiar with the Starship Troopers book and everything. Well, he has a similar thing as well. But let's just do what Hanlon's razor is first. It's expressed in a variety of different ways. But the one that is most common is never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. So it's basically saying like, don't attribute villainy or anger or intentional bad perspectives or whatever when it's just somebody. It can easily be explained by someone just being so stupid that they made this decision that negatively affect a bunch of different people or situations or something like that.
Kind of like voting for Donald Trump in the election. Does that fall into it? Nobody maliciously went out of their way to plummet the country via the orange Cheeto monster.
And that was what, talking the poverty thing we had a little bit ago, that could kind of be it. Like the people who voted for Trump that wanted change, a lot of the people that wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders also wanted change. Well, more people voted for Trump in the Republican Party, so he got that seat. And we all know that Hillary Clinton got more votes, but in the end, a lot of people that were probably on the fence that kind of went to the outsider candidate, maybe they didn't intentionally want to destroy or make people's lives more difficult. And so it isn't them being malicious or destructive. It really is that it's an ignorance. I wouldn't go as far as stupidity, just to be nice to some of those people, but they probably had good intentions, but it's just an ignorant perspective kind of made it the Trump presidency what it is. And so it's like Occam's razor in such that it's a useful tool. So just for a recap for anybody, the law of parsimony or Occam's razor, it's simply a problem-solving principle that it says when presented with competing hypothetical answers to a problem, one should select the one that makes the fewest assumptions. So it's a law of economy. Basically, if you assume a whole bunch of things in order for something to be true, more than likely it's going to be a little weaker than one that's more simple and more grounded. And so that's what most people know these kinds of things from. But this one here is kind of goofy because it's kind of a slap in the face a little bit. And Robert Heinlein, I mentioned a moment ago, his science fiction stuff, he had a book that the Heinlein's razor, they believe may have been a corruption of Robert Heinlein's one. He has a character in his story from the devil theory fallacy, explaining that you have attributed conditions to villainy that is simply the result from stupidity. So there's a couple of different ways that this is kind of going on, but like I was surprised that I hadn't heard of it yet. I mean, I don't really do the logic thing. I know you've spent a lot more time doing logic battles and stuff like that. Had you ever heard of some of these other more obscure?
I've never heard of Heinlein's razor. I've never, because to be honest with you, if this was more popular and you could just use this, I mean, this explains 50% of Christianity, especially during the Dark Ages. Sorry, like I mean, maybe not nowadays, but at least back then it did. But it makes sense. Okay, in the there's an article from TV Tropes, and again, this is just we're not talking super serious, right? But they talk about plots in different TV shows and different things like that. They talk about plots that involved ancient alien conspiracy theories, government conspiracies, where a similar antagonist with a major ability to operate behind the scenes that makes the character question each and every occurrence. The existence of power, secretiveness, malice makes much juicier storytelling than the idea that somebody is just bad or lazy, short-sighted, impulsive, or just plain stupid.
I like that. That's pretty nice because a lot of the guys that show up on that show, I would put them in the stupidity catalog. If anybody's interested in a good slap against the Ancient Aliens, there's Ancient Aliens Debunked. It's like a 3-hour documentary that does a nice job just kind of breaking down that show. But this whole Heinlein's razor thing, like, it's relatively new as far as the timeline is concerned. I believe that, but they believe that it possibly went back as far as Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And what the phrase that comes from his is this is a nice way to say stupidity, but he says misunderstanding and neglect create more confusion in this world than trickery and malice. At any rate, the last two are certainly much less frequent. The trickery and malice are much less frequent, and misunderstandings and neglect create confusion. And so he's basically saying that, just your ignorance is probably causing the trouble as opposed to trickery and malice. So there's a couple other people, Jane West and Bernard Ingham, that have some other sayings that are pretty similar. But I don't know. I think I might put this one in my my little handbook of witty comebacks. I don't know. Do you think this is going to be a useful one for you?
Yeah, probably will. I'll start using it probably a little bit more often. They also had an entry on Rational Wiki, right? Not very long, but it does show up on Rational Wiki because I had to look after you mentioned debating and things like that. Okay, so let me look this up, see what comes up there, because usually there I'll see a lot of the logical fallacies and things like that. And they have a short little thing on it. And the best thing they have on here is a quote from William Shakespeare, Measure for Measure. Therefore you speak unskillfully, or if your knowledge be more, it is much darkened in your malice. So a little Shakespeare for everybody.
That'll bring it up a little bit. Get that highbrow action going.
Yeah. And they have another one where a German general, Kurt von Hammerstein Eckwood, came up with a similar elaborate version. I divide my officers into 4 groups. There are clever, diligent, stupid, and lazy officers. Usually two characteristics are combined. Some are clever and diligent. Their place is in my general staff. The next lot are stupid and lazy. They make up 90% of every army and are suited to do daily routines. Anyone who is both clever and lazy is qualified for the highest leadership duties because he possesses the intellectual clarity and composure necessary for difficult decisions. One must beware, though, of anyone who is stupid and diligent. He must not be entrusted with any responsibility because he is only there to cause mischief.
Wow, that one's really good. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's pretty cool. So, I mean, that's a short little thing. I just thought it would be fun just to play with some wordplay or whatever. But this other one that I just came across was a National Geographic article, and this one's about dogs, and so that always puts a smile on my face. But the thing that I was surprised about, it says, why are dogs so friendly? Science finally has an answer. I would say may have an answer. I don't know if I would go into an absolute making a full-on statement there, but there is this thing called Williams syndrome, and it's characterized by elfin facial features, cognitive difficulties, and a tendency to love everyone. This is something that happens in humans. There are two genes, GTF2I and GTF2IRD1, if you really want to get in specific and take a look at that. But there is it's an actual genetic syndrome that it changes the way you look. So I'm going to guess it has some developmental features as far as the fetal development, but then it's going to change a little bit of the cognitive difficulty. But I've heard of this before. It's a tendency to love everyone. It's basically you're just super nice. Well, they're saying that some of these gene variants appear in dogs, and so when we started breeding dogs, some of these dogs had these features where they were just super loyal and loving and were absolutely non-aggressive, and we were like, this is the best dog I've ever had. I'm going to save it, and it's going to get more breeding. And we actually bred this type of cognitive wishy-washy behavior and total absolute love. Even in some cases, I mean, you hear of dogs that still love their owners even if their owners beat them and do horrible things to them. So like I was blown away. There's no way that like we bred this type of thing into our animals. One of the reasons why dogs are so friendly and absolutely hyper social.
And what was the name of the syndrome again?
Williams syndrome.
Williams syndrome. Okay, I'll have to make sure we note that for the epilogue. And that's kind of funny. Why are we breeding dogs that way? I mean, I guess if you looked at my dog Pugsley before he passed away, rest his soul, he was kind of like that. I guess like you could yell at the dog, you could punish the dog, and he'd still come back. That dog would come back no matter what. The dog would lay on you. He would love on you. It didn't matter what it is. The newer dog, she's not there yet. She's definitely a lot smarter than the older dog was. But I don't know.
Artificial selection, man. Artificial selection can do some pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, and I guess breeding it in dogs, right? Not a bad thing. I wouldn't hope we're not going to breed this in humans because that seems wrong. But I mean, God only knows, But when you think about it, when we talk about breeding, it brings up, again, now we're getting serious again, but it kind of brings up some questions that goes, what is correct? What should we be doing? Should we be allowing for some of these things, or not? And in a dog, is it okay to do this in an animal? Is this an okay thing, to actually do?
Well, we really didn't. So this is something that's been going on for a very long time. So this isn't something that we're consciously, specifically choosing to do. So there's a July 19th study, and I'm going to check to see the year on this article. So July 19, 2017. And so on July 19th, the Science Advances they provided this. That was what they were talking about for those for the hypersocial dogs and this Williams syndrome thing that's been coming through. And then further down in the article, it says that in 2010, a collaboration with Monique Udell, an animal behaviorist at Oregon State University, Von Holt searched the dog and wolf genes and identified alterations in another specific gene that occurred during dog domestication. So they published this in Nature, and this is one of the things that talks about the artificial selection that humans have been doing for a very long time. So these types of gene alterations have been happening for a very long time. So it's not so much something that we're specifically or particularly choosing. It's just one of the reasons why maybe the human and canine relationship has turned into such a dependent, because they were obviously incredibly useful, and once they were domesticated for protection and for I would think probably emotional health and well-being, but also vice versa. The animals, with their symbiosis to their gene changes and the different types of non-natural selection is artificial selection is basically benefiting them significantly, because just think about how many dogs and every different types of breeds that we have. So like that's just a really good thing for them, genetically speaking, to maintain those genes that make humans like them more. So this is kind of the thing, though, is just like you can think of just that kind of personality stuff, that super loving thing, is something that we in small ways can potentially be in our dogs as to why they're so social and so lovable. And I'm gonna guess it's never gonna happen to cats. I'm just gonna say that right now, because my cat is the most non-caring thing I've ever come across. He's like having a roommate who hates you. And you feed him in the morning, you clean his litter box at night, and he might come say hi when you're watching TV. But other than that, he doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. I don't see him ever. I don't know. Like a dog relationship is like just a giant bumbling idiot jumping on you and playing with you. So like it's a different thing, at least maybe with my two dogs. Anyways, I don't know. You've got that new one there, but there could be some relationship stuff that dog's got to get used to you still, as opposed to more than its genetics as to why it's not like your best friend yet.
Yeah, and in fairness, in my world, like for me, she's my best friend. She thinks she is. I mean, she when I wake up, she's there waiting for me. She gets up and walks to my routine in the morning is get up, grumble, 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 yell at whoever's in the bathroom if they aren't out yet. And the dog will follow me all through the house until I go in the bathroom. And I come out of the bathroom, after showering and, shaving and cleaning up. The dog's kind of right there. And if I don't at least pet it, it literally will follow me around all morning until I give it a pet. And then sometimes if I walk to the counter, it gets super excited because it thinks I'm going to cook. And so then it thinks that I'm going to drop food for it. And in fairness, I have been feeding her vegetables. I've been feeding her some tomato, definitely carrot. Because I always have extra carrot. Because I eat carrot on now we're diverging, but I eat carrot on a lot of things. Like I do genuinely eat a lot of carrot myself. Maybe because I think it'll fix my eyes, and obviously that hasn't helped. But I do. I like carrots as an accent food. I won't just pick up a carrot and eat it. I think that's weird. Like it's okay. I could do it if I had to, but like I like it's an accent food. I cook it in all my stir fries. I put it on all my salads, I like it in my spaghetti a lot, weirdly enough. That's a weird thing. Like I'm told nobody likes carrots in their spaghetti. I do.
Nah, some people like having a little more vegetable and stuff, and my parents really like having vegetables in that too. But I don't know, maybe that's some kind of weird genetic
maybe
thing
I'm bred
that you got there.
Way.
You've been bred to like carrots in weird ways or something like that. I don't know. Basically, the whole gist of the entire article is just like the dogs. We're now selecting for dogs that are easy keepers that can spend long periods of time in apartments. So small spaces and stuff. So we have these little small breeds of dogs that are good at basically just kind of living their sole existence in small spaces. Which, if you think about the larger mid-sized dogs, that's just not a possibility. And so as those types of things change, we're going to have more dogs that are better at being kept in small spaces. And taking that genetic and behavioral data, that's one of the things that that's going to help turn wolves into human-loving dogs But in some cases like this, it's just a weird, it's kind of a weird way that evolution can be shown to basically genetically make an animal more predisposed to simply love something of an object of its affection, which would be obviously humans, its owner, the thing that feeds it and protects it. So these are all kinds of cool things that can kind of explain why dogs are so much more friendly and I guess a little bit less packy than they would be in their natural state of nature form in foxes, coyotes, and wolves. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I tell you what, it sheds a lot of light on why I don't like cats and probably can never own one.
I don't know. I need something that I can do a little bit more with. My cat is so. It's like I said. He's so, I guess, a loner. It's just it's like a roommate that you don't really like, and he's just like, "What's going on? You got food for him? No, you didn't bring anything. Okay, whatever. I'll see you later or something." Like it's just there's nothing enjoyable about having him around. But I don't know. Other than that, man, it's just dogs and weird logics, and it's a pretty good show, I think. I think that's pretty much it. I don't really have any more. It's a National Geographic article, and there's a bunch of links in here. So if you want to dig in more, they talk about dog skulls and different evolution pictures and stuff. So you can kind of go down a rabbit hole on this, but that was pretty much all I really had on that.
So anyway, yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up. Get you all out of here early tonight. Thank you all for sticking around through another amazing episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Next week, we have a episode that is a full interview with Ian Harris, a atheist, humanist, secular stand-up comedian. We have a full hour dedicated directly to him, and we hope you all enjoy it. After that, Hannah and I will be back with more amazing sex stories that you've never heard of before, plus a lot more about the Orange Cheeto Monster. Make sure you take care of yourself, take care of your neighbor, and have a great night, everyone. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.